really great to have everyone here today. My name's Peggy. I'm going to make this really casual for the next 40 minutes to an hour. At any point you have questions, please just shoot it out and maybe Belinda can help moderate it if there's a question coming through. But I'm going to go through some slides. The first section will kind of just introduce what the whole idea of true cost of food is and my background behind it. And then afterwards, we're going to talk about more on solutions. So I'm very excited to get started. So can everyone see these slides or the set of slides? All right. So as I said, very excited to be here. Today, we're going to be talking about the true cost of food. This is something that I really want to start off with because in the past 2 years, I've been really reading up on Ellen MacArthur Foundation and the work they do on circular economy. And one of the quotes that I kind of took out was, for every dollar spent on food, society pays $2 in health, environmental, and economic costs. So this might not be quite prone to people's knowledge, but anytime that you're actually paying for food, there's $2, or anytime that you pay $1 for food, there's $2 that are going to externalities, meaning hidden costs. On the right-hand side is a snapshot of one of my earliest books that I read in 2004 to 2005 by Marianne Nestle on food politics. And that's really when I got started in the space of not just cooking food and serving food and opening restaurants, but really utilizing our platform to generate some positive change through the economics of how food is grown, how food is served. And so still to this day, nothing has changed. Actually, it's become worse. So you can see that for every dollar, only 20 cents really goes to the farm. As I said, nowadays it's even less than that. And the rest of it goes into the business of actually serving that food. So I'm gonna get to the next slide. So just a little bit about myself and my background. My whole food plant-based journey started 21 years ago, so when I was still a teenager. And my professional culinary and hospitality journey really started around the same time as well. I was classically trained, so I went to French culinary school. None of this plant-based crap was taught, so I learned it all on my own, and purely because that was my passion and what I found was sustainable for my health and for the environment. So between 2012 to 2019, we had Grassroots Pantry open in Hong Kong, and the whole platform and idea of Grassroots was really to engage the community and link the entire food value chain together to get people to understand more about our food systems and why we should be supporting local and organic foods. I see some more people entering the room. Nice to have you. So in the last couple of years was really when things started to just like go crazy in terms of how I linked my passion and what I really want to do in the food system together. We produced a sustainability report, which was recognized by the United Nations SDG SCAP as a best practice case study. And then we also were awarded with the Environmental Excellence Award on the food service sector. So that kind of gave us some accreditation in terms of are we doing well enough, and holding that kind of accountability as a social entrepreneur, as a business owner. Are we doing well enough, not just as a business, but are we doing well enough for the environment and for society? Since then, we've transitioned to a consultancy and training. So we've been engaging with different food service providers and helping develop concepts that are more low carbon, more sustainable, holistic, and doing a lot of training on that for other chefs. And upcoming, we are going to be launching Zero Food Print Asia, which I'll talk a little bit about at the end, but it's all related to the true cost of food. So next slide, there. All right, so how is food currently priced? The current food system has supported a fast growing population, rapid economic development, urbanization. In the past, the focus has always been on improving the efficiency of production, quantity, and yield, measured in terms of money and calorie output. And I would say how luxurious food is. Science and technology has been developed to maximize agricultural output rather than meeting local food and livelihood needs. And this comes at a cost. So the linear model in our food system no longer is sustainable to sustain our planet. In the long term, we really need to start talking about regeneration. Now, currently, the market prices we pay only reflect immediate tangible costs like processing, packaging, distribution, transportation, marketing, retail, and the markup for profitability. But commodity and energy prices also influence the short-term fluctuations in food prices, such as we saw during the beginning of the pandemic, certain food prices that were food that were being imported from outside of Hong Kong, like China or even in Europe and US, were marked up way higher. So that kind of those type of fluctuations make it difficult for consumers to purchase good, clean food. Now, large supermarkets can often afford to sell food for cheaper because food is often sourced from intensive, large-scale farms who have technology, inexpensive labor, government subsidies, and grants to really maximize the production. Purchasing in mass quantities means that less cost per item means that it's less cost per item. So going back to like what we learned in economics class, economy of scale, supermarkets like Park and Shop welcome, they can barter for prices. So hence why when we look at like the true cost of food as in organic versus conventionally grown foods, the price difference is so high. Now, prices are also set by what you as consumers are willing to pay. So all of these really are amplifies the issues behind the true cost of food. Cheap food is not as cheap as it seems, and I get a lot of slack for this. You know, when people talk about, you know, why is your food more expensive, or why is your broccoli more expensive, or, you know, why is your dish more expensive? But I often want to ask people like, why is your food so cheap? You know? So cheap food is really not as cheap as it seems. The price at checkout deflects all of the hidden costs, meaning externalities or external costs that we eventually pay for over time and that are passed down to future generations. So you might not even see it. We are certainly seeing it now, but a lot of it isn't even felt. Now, these hidden costs account for damage to environment, impacts on human health, poor labor conditions, and societal impacts. These costs also are costs that we pay for through tax dollars, towards government subsidies that are subsidizing industrialized farming, which is harmful for our environment as well as our society. And it goes into tax dollars that towards welfare, social services for workers. And additionally, healthcare and water and pollution cleanup. These hidden costs are not included in the price of products sold because we permit cost shifting. So let's say me as a restaurant, I want to factor in me as a restaurateur, I want to factor in those external costs into my prices, but will the customer pay for it? You know, us as a society, we're not there yet in terms of really understanding how to factor in and measure external costs. And the cost of externalities are transferred away from those who are earning the most profit, meaning the big agricultural businesses and the big food companies, from producing the food to consumers and society. So the consumers and our society are really paying for those external costs right now. So I'm just gonna jump into an example of how restaurants and convenient foods exacerbate this problem. So on the left, you'll see that this is a pie chart of a traditional restaurant economic, you know, what I learned in hotel school, how you would normally factor in costs in a restaurant. So let's say on average, food cost is 25%, labor is 25%, and rent and utility 25%. In some places, maybe rural areas, it might be much less. But in cities like Hong Kong, it can go all the way up to like 45% to 50%. Now, miscellaneous is like any kind of, government rates and like MPF and all of that. And then what's left of it is really the profit margin. And I'm sharing this with you because I don't think that most people who are not in the restaurant industry how minimal our profit margins are. And 15% actually is on the good side, So we got to look at it differently. Now, let's move to the right-hand side, which is, metropolitan restaurants or restaurants in metropolitan cities like Hong Kong, where we rely on eating out and the convenience culture. This is, I guess, like also a good scenario where let's say the food cost is around 25%, labor 30%, rent 30%, miscellaneous 5%. Profit margin is very, very, very slim. Now, how do restaurateurs then increase their profit margin? All of those other forms of costs are fixed costs. So, and I'm talking here like I know everything about numbers, but I'm not a numbers person, but this is pretty darn basic. How are we going to increase our profit margin if every single cost out there is fixed other than food costs? Of course, restaurateurs are going to squeeze our food costs as low as possible, meaning they're going to purchase cheap foods as much as possible. And of course, they can also exploit workers, but the labor laws here in Hong Kong are pretty strict, so that's not happening anytime soon. So most of it really falls on food costs, and hence we are really exacerbating this issue because we as restaurateurs and chefs want cheaper foods so that we can feed people with cheaper food so that we can make more money. That's a basic capitalism model that we live in. Another basic scenario that I want to share with you, me as a chef, when I'm pricing my dishes, and I get that quite a lot about, again, our food being expensive or anything, but we got to think about the quality and the value of ingredients and value of food, rather than just what's on the paper or what's on the menu. Now, this dish is a very basic but delicious and ethically sourced, sustainable dish. Okay, so we get local organic tofu, supporting our local society of tofu makers here in Hong Kong, using organic soybeans. Then we have some homemade kimchi, which we make ourselves, an organic short grain brown rice with some tahini dressing, sauteed mushrooms, local organic greens, all of the macro nutrients you need in a normal, regular diet. Oops, sorry. Now, all of that at cost on wholesale is about $19.5. Now, if I'm looking at it like I did talk about earlier, using food costs at 25%, then I'd factor in the selling price to $100. Okay, that is if people will pay $100 for it. So let's, on the other costs, we're going to look at like food costs, $25, manpower 30, rent, utilities 30, marketing 450, MPF, insurance, tax, all those miscellaneous costs. I mean, in Hong Kong, you need to pay for marketing to make sure that your restaurant survives. So all of those costs added means that your assumed profit is really $10. So with every single dish that you're selling at $100, you're making $10. Now, again, it goes back to the point of why restaurants and why chefs and why people who are making your food would want to buy cheaper food in order to increase their profit margin. And that's what's exacerbating the entire issue. Okay, so I'm going to jump into true cost accounting. True cost accounting, in order to make critical changes, I need to put this back on. But in order to make critical changes in our food system and to ensure resilient future, stakeholders must understand the externalized costs from production and products and their impacts. TCA, so true cost accounting, is a tool that aims to help us understand and evaluate the positive and negative impacts of industrial and corporate food systems. And with that knowledge, we can advocate for sustainable alternatives and hold governments, institutions, and businesses accountable for the impacts of their choices. So what's calculated into true cost? True cost aims to implement financial accountability for immediate and external costs. So earlier I said external costs, meaning environment costs, environmental costs, health costs, social costs, labor costs, and the well-being of societies. And so when we're looking at what the true cost is, it's really retail price plus external costs. Okay. So I'm gonna just quickly share this video with you. I don't know if it's gonna jump into it. We'll just watch this to get a bit of an idea.
It's not playing right now. Peggy, we cannot see a video right now.
Okay, sorry, just 1 second. Just hold on. Thanks for letting me know. I was like totally just waiting. Were you able to hear any sounds?
No.
Okay.
No, we can't hear any sound or see anything.
All right, so I've got it here now. Got it?
Yes, we can see it. We cannot hear it.
You can't hear it?
Yeah, we can't hear it. You might need to share also the music from it. Sorry, everybody, technical issues. If you want, you can also share the video. If you want, you can share the video in the chat and I can try and check.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I will just put the video link on there and then I'll just keep going. But in the meantime, does anyone have any questions so far? Okay, all right. So we're gonna just jump onto the next slide. And I have my cat here, one of my cats. She loves just joining when everyone's on. Sorry. Ay, ay, ay. I'm having some technical issues. I can't find my PowerPoint. Oh, there you go. Okay.
No problem.
All right. Okay. So here on the next slide, so now we need to really talk about what the solutions are and how we as businesses and even you as consumers or we as consumers can better evaluate our purchases and what we purchase, really. So first on the left are the externalities, environmental, health, social, economic. And first we have to measure and value negative health, environment, social and economic externalities. Once we identify and measure these, then the decision makers will have the data to be able to analyze, evaluate, and make changes across the food system that reflect those true costs. Afterwards, potentially it feeds back to stakeholders in the food system who in turn evaluate their own decision making. Then we continuously reiterate those processes and to progress towards regenerative systems. Now it sounds pretty simple, but I can tell you that just simply in our food system, it's extremely difficult. Just because, like I said earlier, we work in a linear model in our food system where there's so much disconnect. And so to be able to really create the circular chain of decision making in order to work towards progressing for a regenerative system is going to take a lot of people and a lot of effort. So I'm going to use Impossible Meats as an example here, as a business that we need to think of at the stage of our society where everyone is switching out of single-use plastic or switching out of or switching to more plant-based diets. Is plant-based the only solution? Now, I'm always going to advocate for everyone to eat less meat, but there's many forms of plant-based. And so let's talk a little bit about Impossible being a business that has really garnered so much funding around what they do. And I also want to hear about what your thoughts are as well. So Impossible Meats claims to offset environmental impact that raising industrialized meat has on the planet. But what about all of those externalities? So we're going to go through every single step on environmental costs. Are we looking at, the water usage in wetlands? What about land degradation, conversion, biodiversity loss, soil health, quality, animal welfare, solid and toxic waste, air quality, and climate change? Industrialized or industrial food production, whether it's plant-based or even organic at any stage, all of those processing, distribution systems are putting ongoing pressure on the environment and natural resources, which does not get recognized. So at this point, and recently I found out also like Impossible uses wheat. Yes, we've known this, but they actually rely on GMO wheat as well. So is mass producing GMO wheat to produce highly processed ingredient that claims to be more environmentally friendly compared to industrialized agriculture? Is that going to take into account land degradation, biodiversity loss, animal welfare, such and such? Something to think about and something that we must start to measure. Now, on public health, although the industrial food system has created rapid and efficient production methods that produce enough food to feed the world, the maximization of calorie output with energy-dense foods and products designed for convenience culture has put our health and health of our future generations at risk. Some of those key externalities and indicators are dietary patterns, malnutrition, NCDs, obesity, hypertension, high cholesterol, foodborne illness, antibiotics, occupational health, agrochemicals, exposure, environmental pollution. It goes on and on. On the Impossible case study, when we're looking at their entry point and how they entered the market, I think that whether any kind of alternative protein has to ensure is that they cannot claim themselves to be healthy. Because when you're really looking at a diet that is highly processed, you can't be selling something to be healthy. So understandably, this is not what the marketers want to be putting Impossible as, but it also affects consumers, because consumers are the ones that now, and the marketing people around it are the ones now saying that it is healthy. So it creates a lot of greenwashing and a lot of false information out there. So is consuming ultra processed ingredients good for our health? That's the number one thing that we need to ask. On economic costs, the current economic environment of food supply chains is highly distorted. Food trade policies often favor the agenda of large agri-food firms, and a portion of taxpayers' money go towards agricultural subsidies for large producers, likely farming for large firms. As mentioned before, we pay 3 times for our food, once at the time of purchase, second through taxes, and third for environmental cleanup and health side effects. Some key externalities here, whether through your taxes, health care costs, price distortion, subsidies, food waste, food security, hunger. Now, on the Impossible case study, claims that the protein that you can get from patty accounts for the same that you would with animal meats. But is this food going to people who are protein deficient? That's something we need to be asking. Is this food available to people in communities that are protein deficient? Is the price point accessible enough for them? Otherwise, it does not solve, or Impossible as a business does not solve this external cost or this externality. Now let's move on to social costs. While large firms who neglect their externalized costs reap economic benefits, low income and marginalized communities around the world are the most affected. So whether it's land dispossession and land grabbing, workers' rights, labor conditions, livelihood, basic human rights, food access, gender equality and equity, knowledge, culture, and skills, I can tell you that most people who are working as farmers and as low-wage chefs or cooks are people mostly of minorities, and generally they don't also get the knowledge and the skills for them to be able to progress. So when it comes to Impossible, certainly we don't know so much yet. This will come in time, but hopefully that what they're trying to do will be as accessible and as equal for society as a whole, and which does not claim land to grow a certain type of food specifically for the purpose of creating their product. How many minutes do I have still? Let's see. Okay. So it's clear that business as usual is not working, and that we need to change agricultural practices and hold companies accountable in order to ensure equitable access to healthy foods for the global population, and to safeguard a resilient planet for our future generations. So does this mean that all of the food prices will have to increase in order to account for true costs? Well, researchers claim that cost-benefit analysis cannot overcome its fatal flaw. It's completely reliant on an impossible attempt to price the priceless values of life, health, nature, and the future. Even if the price of food does increase to account for externalities, it's impossible to account for every single dollar that went into producing the food product. But we can't just give up here. So that's why we must look into solutions. And one of the solutions really starts with changing our mindsets and changing the way that we think and the way that we look at food. For long-term change to happen, we have to be able to see our food system as a system, and that it's complex and interdependent with very interdependent networks and relationships. And then we need to evaluate the positive and negative externalities in food production. So consumers have a right to know the complexities of the food production. So we demand for transparency in the food supply chain. And looking at the true cost of food is one of the options that could redirect consumer behavior and policies and create new options for businesses as well. Only when we understand the true cost of food, we can make better informed decisions and changes to our food system. And besides, it's in the companies and the government's best interest to do so because our economy depends on natural resources and raw materials, which will eventually disappear if we do not immediately take action towards change. So with this, businesses can make better decisions about their supply chain. Hospitality services can make better decisions about their product sourcing, and governments can make better decisions about policies, while consumers can make better decisions at the supermarket or other food retailers. In the words of Wendell Berry and Michael Pollan, eating is an agricultural and political act. Now, I wanted to kind of just share a little bit with you on something where we've been working on that is directly related to the true cost of food. And clearly it's a very passionate space of mine for many years. And I do think that there is no single band-aid to our world's issues, especially in the food system. And so in order to fix this, we have to be looking at it holistically and in every single step of the food value chain. Our food system accounts for more than 1/3 of global greenhouse gases. And in Hong Kong alone, the ecological footprint of restaurant and hospitality industry accounts for 8% of our total ecological footprint, while food, in addition, is another 22%. So you as a customer or me as an operator or food service professional, we can't put a blind eye on it just because we can just pick up our phone or just walk downstairs to 7-Eleven and pick up some food and not think about where those external costs are coming from. So while we can reduce our impact by switching out single-use plastics, turning plant-based and all of those things, we need collective action in order to make systemic changes. So as restaurateurs, I believe that chefs want to cook with better food. They want to source locally, even though there's not a lot for them to source currently, but we have the capability of growing food locally. And at the same time, they also want to not harm the environment any further. But how are we going to do that? So in 2018, we did a life cycle analysis with Zero Footprint, which is an NGO based in San Francisco. And through the life cycle analysis, it was a really revealing process for me because as an operator, as a chef, I've never seen accounting in this form, which is technically what we call a scope 3 auditing, scope 3 life cycle analysis, really looking at the hidden costs and the externalities of our supply chain. Now, through the LCA, we were able to ascertain the emissions per diner emits. And that was really exciting and interesting to me because then they compared it to other general restaurants who do serve meat, who don't recycle maybe, or who don't divert food waste. You know, they're just operating this regular business as usual. Their emissions are generally 3 to 4 times more higher than what we would, what you see here. So on the annual footprint, we were emitting approximately 232 metric tons of CO2 per year. And so that would mean that we have to somehow offset it in some way, right? So Zero Footprint, basically, the exciting thing is now we're going to be bringing it to Asia. And they're also going to be branching off into a Nordic arm as well as a Deutsch arm. And so we're taking care of the Asia sector. Basically, we're taking the same kind of model of utilizing restaurants as a platform to fund. Remember when I said earlier, most of the subsidies that the government gives are going into industrialized agriculture. We're going to be granting regenerative agriculture. So in order to make this work, we need to mobilize the restaurant industry. So what better way to do that than with a bunch of restaurateurs, you know? So the first phase is really the 1% pledge, where we get restaurants to pledge 1% at the end of the bill, which is minimal. It doesn't hurt you. It's basically $1 here, $1 there. But all of that money is going into regenerative agriculture, whether locally or regionally. And then the second phase is what I talked about earlier, the LCA. So going through a life cycle analysis so that the restaurateurs and the chefs can actually see and measure what their operations performance is, and then to be able to better improve. And the third part is really just any form of donations as an NGO. Once the application is successful, any form of donations will help. And we've identified over the last 8 months some potential projects that we could be funding, and hence why I constantly go and visit these farms and meet people who are growing our food to see where we can help and how we can mobilize. So that's it. Yeah. So I hope you enjoyed listening, and please ask any questions you'd like. I'll try my best to answer.
Thank you so much, Peggy. Let's wait for some questions. Everybody, don't be shy. Ask her questions. I think while people think about the questions are a bit shy, if we make it a bit Hong Kong specific, what would be, and we make it consumer specific, because I think a lot of us, are consumers. What can we do? Because it's so overwhelming, if we look at it always and we're like, oh my God, where should I start? What should I do? So, Tanya is asking a question already. At what stage is the Zero Footprint Asia at right now?
Right. So we are launching with 20 pilot restaurants on June 1st. Yeah. So go and support those restaurants. At this stage, we have identified all of our board of directors and also advisory board. So some of them are university academics who have been working on soil health for decades. And then some have been working on life cycle analysis, understanding the supply chain. So we're really connecting everyone together, which is very exciting because we don't know everything ourselves. We can only do what we're good at with the operations, but it's by recognizing that other people have a lot of added value in order to close the loop. That's going to be the most exciting part. Yeah. So that's where we are. And of course, we're also going to be fundraising or like applying for government grants and applying for grants here and there. Yeah.
We have another question. Is there such a thing as a sustainable meat alternative?
Yeah, I mean, like sustainable is such a huge word, right? Like what's sustainable? We have like less than 6 years left, in order to not wear out our planet any further, or in order for us to be able to reverse in any way possible. But sustainable is a huge word, because what's sustainable does not mean that it can regenerate. We can keep sustaining, we can keep surviving, but are we healthy? So when we're looking at sustainable forms of meat, look at labeling in terms of seeing whether it's free range or grass-fed or regenerative. There are actually upcoming labels by the Real Organic Project and Regenerative Organics labeling that are happening and popping up like in the US. They're basically started by the people who started the entire organic movement in the 60s. Because over the years, organic, this kind of label has been so tainted by the big agri giants. So I think it's important to keep up to date as to what these latest labels are and who are the ones heading it. Follow the money, who's actually funding it. All of that is important. So sustainable meat, sustainable fish per se, yeah, you have to do your research. One of the reasons I turned plant-based was because there's such a lack of transparency in our food supply chain that I'd much rather not eat it at all, and so I much rather buy my food directly from the farmer who grew it for me, and that way I can build a relationship and there's accountability as well. Yeah.
All right. Elena is asking, do you have any vision for the future on how we eat and what your attitude towards food will be like?
It's it's a question that probably is not a good question to ask a person who's an idealist. I am an optimist and want to see everything in like the best light, and so I mean, it's going to take education. It's going to take us time, but I think that it's so important for us to not forget. I think this past year we've kind of stalled on our work towards sustainability, but at the same time, it's also really sparked a lot of conversation around regeneration. So we must not stall in terms of currently the attention is all on COVID and health and public health and vaccinations and all of that. But at the same time, we can be doing a lot of things to keep regenerating and restoring our earth. And it's through education that we can normalize this kind of conversation and get people to understand the direct relation between carbon, good health, good food, good soil, healthy soil, how that actually draws down carbon as well. But I'm hopeful, yeah. What's the most shocking true price of food item? Oh my gosh. Who is it? Well, I just heard one like yesterday. No, today. I heard one today. A restaurant serving an asparagus dish at like $1,200 or something like that, which is shocking to me. But that's because of greed, that's because they can. That's because people will pay for it. Yeah, so I would say that is quite shocking because asparagus is asparagus. It's asparagus here in Taiwan, asparagus there. You can't grow asparagus with gold flakes, gold flake leaves and make that more expensive. So the price is really then all of the money that is required to pay for the business to run it. Yeah.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Also, to everybody that joined, make sure that you have your full name in the participant list, just so we, when we do the giveaway, we know who we're gonna give it to. We have all your signups, but I see that some of you only have the first name in there. All right. If there's not any more questions, yeah, Peggy, if there's one thing that you want us to really take away today or that any one of us can really do, what would it be?
Well, I mentioned earlier that, food accounts for 1/3 of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. Every single one of us consumes food at least 3 times a day. We rely on food and we depend on our farmers to grow our food, despite what anyone will tell you with technology and hydroponics and whatsoever. We rely on good health of soil to grow healthy foods. So we must not forget that connection, and that every single time you're purchasing your next meal or you're purchasing food, take a look at what you're purchasing. What about the packaging waste? Can you shorten that supply chain by purchasing directly as much as possible? Can you do more bulk buys? There's so many shops out there, which I will list out in my supplies list in my cookbook, where you can source certain things, that doesn't need to be astronomically expensive, that can sustain your health as well as sustain, or not just sustain, actually regenerate your entire body, as well as contribute to the local society. So every single time you're purchasing food, you're choosing to vote for a certain type of food that you're producing. And hence why, what my goal is in Hong Kong, we have the highest amount of restaurants per capita in the world. That means there are enough restaurants to go around, like, I don't know, 14 times. I can't remember what the stat is. And it's also a $15 billion US economy per year. So there's a lot of money going through the restaurant, but is it going to the right places, And when we talk about systemic issues, we're also talking about things that we don't have full control about. But one of the things that you can control is where are you spending that money? Where are you willing to put your dollars, and how you're willing to vote. The future that you're willing to vote for will rely and depend on how you choose to eat. Yeah. So start there. And then, of course, hopefully you'll pick up a copy of my cookbook, and there'll be hundreds of tips and tons of recipes for you to replicate.